I'm Alan Parsons, and welcome to the Art and Science of Sound Recording on iTunes. You're going to see an extract from the keyboard section of the program, and also some great bonus footage from Rami Jaffrey, the keyboard player with the Foo Fighters and the Wallflowers. Keep checking the website and also on Twitter at Art Science Sound. And we'll see you very soon, and enjoy the podcast. Let's go and tickle the ivories.
Organs provide sounds that can be infinitely sustained, and they can be used for anything from a pad to a screaming solo. Although there are plenty of synths and virtual instruments, if you want the real deal, you're talking about a Hammond, first made in the 1930s and still as popular and powerful today as it ever was, despite weighing in at a cuddly 300 pounds.
Well, the Hammond B3, again, is so diverse, and you could just make so many different sounds. It's not just an organ. That's, you get in there and makes a lot of fun stuff. I call the drawbars my EQ. You got your lows, you got your mids, and you got your highs.
The Hammond organ has always, in my book, been associated with the Leslie cabinet, which contains literally a speaker that rotates, and it produces a sound totally unlike any other. It was a remarkable invention in that it produced a Doppler effect, which is very difficult to reproduce without movement between the listener and the source of the sound. And that's one of the magic things about Hammond. It produces this very slight Doppler effect, which results in a pitch variation.
A Leslie cabinet has two speaker arrangements, a rotating horn that handles the high frequencies and a 15-inch loudspeaker pointing downwards towards a drum, a kind of rotating baffle, which puts out the low frequencies. Both actually receive their signals from a split mono source, but the result is unquestionably stereo. Both the horn and the drum spin at a fast or slow speed, activated by a switch alongside the keyboard.
Slow is great, and when there's a build up into a chorus, use this fast speed for drama, and then back to slow to, let the song stand out. Well, I always usually mic up my Leslie with two Royer ribbon mics, getting the stereo effect only on the top tweeter here.
A lot of engineers would mic the top and the bottom.
Sure.
You prefer not to?
A lot of them do. And the other thing is the lower one, first of all, they never perfectly spin at the same spot. The top Leslie comes down, it doesn't stop on a dime, but it slows down pretty fast. The low one takes a minute to get back to slow speed. And most of the time I'm already back at fast speed, so it's always catching up. And a lot of the times, a lot of artists always complain, can you stick to slower speed most of the time, please?
You can stick a mic on the front of the horn, the back of the horn, the side of the horn. 2 mics, you can go 6 mics, all kinds of ways of dealing with it. One thing about the Leslie, which everybody kind of needs to know, is that the horn, which looks like it's producing sound from 2 angles, is actually only producing sound from one of those angles. The other one is a dummy tube just to mechanically balance the rotating speaker. So if you think you're going to get sound out of both those orifices in the top horn, you're mistaken. It's only going to come out of one of those horns. I used to have the best luck with getting a little bit of air around the organ, mic from maybe 2 or 3 feet away. One on the top, one on the bottom. Lovely stereo effect, and that was usually good for me.
I'm really a B3 organ player. That's what my answer is. What people usually get out of me is play the B3, do your thing. I love it. The drawbars are like an equalizer. You got some lows, you got some mids, you got some highs. I can make any part fit into a song. The minute you
get into a track, you could hear what exactly fits. No one has to EQ and find your
And
space.
presumably a really good Leslie
Of course, yeah, great 122 Leslie or any of the other wacky ones, but that's my main rig. That is usually...
Any organ heroes, Brian Auger maybe? Or?
Oh gosh, well, Ben Montench of the Heartbreakers is one of my organ heroes because he taught me how to play very important, simple things. If you hear Tom Petty stuff, it's not busy, it's not complicated, but the little pieces that are there are so important and so great and as strong as the lyric in the song to me. I mean, and to a lot of people too. I think the music audience today is a little suspicious when they hear anything too good, which is boggles my mind because it's like, well, good is good, you know? I mean, whether it's MIDI or, you know.
Why the Foo Fighters? Why did you, I mean, presumably it is taking a lot of your time?
It is, but it's a very odd situation because the Wallflowers kind of really eased back on things about 4 years ago, and which was good because then I started pursuing more producing, and it's just great to be around town. And the Foo Fighters, it was a complete fluke. I played on their records as a session keyboard player. They never had a keyboard player before. And a couple records into it, Dave wanted to do an acoustic tour, which was completely a departure from what they do. And he said, well, we can't go on tour without keyboards, and you know. And he said, would you be able to do it? And I said, no, what kind of tour? A few dates here and there in theaters. I said, perfect. And then it was
It is a guitar band, really, isn't it?
Oh gosh, more than I've ever heard anybody. And then the funny thing, that was a couple of years ago, and then they said, look, we're going to do a tour where we'll feature an acoustic type set in the middle of the arena on a different stage, and you know, you won't play on the crazy proggy, you know, hardcore guitar music. And I said, fine. I mean, he's such a great, that whole band, they're just the nicest people to be on tour with. It's a hard thing to be on the road, you know.
Foo Fighters aside, or maybe including Foo Fighters, what do people want from you as a keyboard player? Do they want your playing ability?
When I became wanted as a keyboard player in the studio, the main reason why I was getting the work is because they didn't want a programmed MIDI guy. I had the broken keyboards, and here's my farfisa. This note doesn't work. That note doesn't work. It takes 45 minutes to warm up, and we're going to have a great time. You know, people are like, you know, I don't know how they paid me for that. I had a deal with Yamaha, and I was actually enjoying the Yamaha motifs. I was like, this is incredible. There's, you know, and I was doing certain things. The sound has 4 patches, you know, 4 drawbars that affect the sound. So here would be a cheesy guitar picking noise, you know, something that would be on Seinfeld in between the, you know, credits. But you mess around here, you take out the attack, and then you just have the feedback. And then here I have a sound that's like these backwards Strawberry Fields flutes, but more interesting because it's not the Strawberry Field. Yeah. So it has these incredible sounds. They're just right there, and I you know, there's so much great things that could happen. It's not necessarily has to be MIDI, just these great things that, you know, are for sale.
Using Pro Tools, does that come into your job description as a session player or not?
It does. You know why? For years now, 99% of the sessions I do, whether or not the session is down the block in Hollywood, I come over, throw it into my hard drive, or actually they send me an MP3 on email with you know, do some cool things in the chorus, maybe take a stab at some verses. I mean, this is huge projects, big bands, fancy producers, and lots of political A&R people. Somehow I slipped through the cracks. I'm allowed to do it by myself, come in with a B3 busy and a B3 safe, you know, or, you know, I'll nickname them, you know, depending on the song, just so I cover a little bit of bases, because I am consolidating solid files. I'm not sending them a mess of clicks and pops, but I do it all myself. Although most of the keyboards I play are vintage and Hammond B3 organ and Wurlitzers, and they make incredible noises. Even sometimes the buzzes can be musical. recently plugging in a MIDI keyboard and actually playing one part, and then you could, to a certain sound, let's say mellotron flutes, and then the touch, as hard as you hit it, and exact notes comes through with changing every sound. It's incredible. I know it sounds so basic, and I remember I remember hearing that that's what MIDI is, for the most part, for keyboard players. But it's incredible, because then you could throw on sounds that have completely different attack, and you could combine them, different levels. And sometimes the original sound you started with is abandoned, and you're like, this is incredible. I love the puzzle game on Pro Tools when you put down a lot of different ideas. This is great right here. This is great right here. And sure, it's not thinking of a band performing it at a club down the street, because how is he going to switch around? But it makes a song sound great, and it adds a lot. The one thing I've seen is producers' bedside manner, if that's the right kind of word, where it's like a psychology certain game to make the artist comfortable, to get the best product out of them. And I've seen so many producers say the wrong thing. You do have to have a certain bedside manner, or kind of a small head game to make everyone as comfortable as possible to get the best thing. And I've seen so many things. I mean, artists are an insecure breed, so it's a very, fine line to walk when, saying, oh, this song has got to be way different. Artists, oh, you don't like what there's going to be a you don't like what I do before, great, let's make this better. So, there's a way of saying things, and I think that's the best thing I can do as a producer is make people feel comfortable to get the best possible product. I tried to come in as a deaf, dumb, and blind boy to, I think that's when my best things come out, and something that actually has character and is simple at the same time. So I don't want to learn too much, because it makes me play special notes, because that's all I know right now. And that's what happened. We did a take of a song, and I swear, it was just a few chord song, but I had one note going on the B3 and bringing in and out, and a little fuller in the chorus, and it worked over all the chords. And at the end of the take, Dan Huff said, come on in, that sounds great. And as I walked in, Keith Urban said, that was the most incredible keyboard part. And I was looking around like I was going to be punked. I was like, where's Ashton Kutcher? Because I swear, I was like, you enjoyed that? But they were so relieved, because the organ player that they had before was two hands, and I mean, it was just a rock song. And you just have to come in and out and color it and make it sound like a band. And they're like, you sound like you've played in bands. I'm like, that's what I do. Yeah. So it's really what, sometimes you'll think they want something, and what you did by accident is what they wanted. So it's hard to have a notion of where it's going to go before you get there. You just gotta, you could come in with the cowboy hat and like, we wanted to do rock, and here's the bandana. It's like, damn, I came with the wrong hat. So you got to be careful.
Armed with all the necessary component parts to record and process audio on your computer, there are one or two settings or decisions that need to be made before you're quite ready to roll. The first concerns from which point in the audio chain you're going to hear your audio. And the second is how to deal with delays caused by computer processing, which we call latency. Latency can give us all kinds of problems. For any real-time musical performance, anything but the smallest amount of latency is a complete no-no, obviously. So we want to make sure when we're working with real players, overdubs and so on, that it's kept to a bare minimum. I asked my good friend Michael McDonald about his experiences with latency.
Well, for the longest time, I guess I just put up with it. But then as I started to understand it, I really, what was wrong and what it was doing, I really hated it, I remember with Pro Tools in the first few years of that, when they started using it, what I learned is a lot of times engineers, when they're not musicians, they don't really hear latency in the finer, I can hear, literally a fraction of a second, you know, because I've played it and I know how it's supposed to feel, you know. And so that was kind of a terrorizing element of Pro Tools early on, you know. You'd hear your piano and you'd be going, that just doesn't feel right. I know. And I remember one time we worked with an engineer, and he had his Pro Tools basement studio, and it was really very nice. We were mixing something. He goes, look, let me get the mix up, and you guys come back. I came back, and the piano was just way out, you know what I mean? And he had put it through some look ahead, like some mastering software, you know. And I tried to explain to the guy, that's way off, you know. He goes, it couldn't be. It's, you know, it's the old engineer artist thing. It's impossible. You couldn't hear that. It's best 40 thousandths of a second, you know. Trust me, it's way off. You know.
Direct monitoring is a term used for hearing the outputs of your audio interface directly, in other words, before it gets to your computer. Some interfaces have a mix knob to control whether you are hearing more input or more software output. Sometimes this is controlled in software.
The downside of direct monitoring is that you can't insert software processing into the signal path, and an alternative is to use hardware that contains its own reverb and effects. At the very least, this should be adequate for just monitoring effects while overdubbing. You can always use your preferred plugins once you've got your master takes. This might also be the justification for investing in some outboard processing. Latency is dependent upon buffer size and sample rate, which can be adjusted in your software. You shouldn't change your sample rate once you've started a project. Very low latency values can be achieved with modern interfaces, drivers, and a fast computer. It's interesting to consider that church organists have had to deal with latencies measured in almost seconds. A latency of just a few milliseconds should, for the most part, be perfectly acceptable. For most of us, the concept of recording music on tape is a thing of the past. Even digital tape machines have largely disappeared. But most of the basic functions of tape machines have been imported into the new world of digital recording. All recording software, rather quaintly, allows buttons to be pressed to control what we call the transport: play, record, fast forward, rewind, and of course stop. But the difference is that tape is a linear format, whereas DAWs allow us to access any piece of audio at any time. Now it's point, click, and hit the spacebar. When I came into the studio industry at Abbey Road, my job was as a tape operator, and that was a separate activity to the engineer. With DAW recording, we effectively have the engineer doing both jobs, and he has to be computer savvy. Many producers, myself included, who used to engineer everything on a session in analog days, have found that working with a computer whiz is an essential. You can only wear so many hats, especially if you're a performing producer. DAW recording gives us effectively unlimited tracks, cut and paste audio, multi-level undo and redo, and virtually unlimited audio processing and plugins for any effect or fix-it that our heart desires. Anyone who predates DAW recording will tell you what a very different experience recording used to be. One example is the time spent waiting for a tape to be rewound to the top of a song. Wasted time? No. Time to contemplate the meaning of life, take a sip of coffee, or even... Next we move on to